Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we talk Detroit Lions football with special guest Jeff Iafrate of Crunch Time Sports and the Lions Collective. We hit on a variety of Detroit Lions topics, including, but not limited to, the defensive secondary, the state of the team overall, and expectations heading into 2026. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Jameer Gibbs, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Jeff Iafrate from Crunch Time Sports and the Lions Collective. Jeff, thanks for taking time to meet with me and talk Lions today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad we can finally make it happen.
I appreciate that. Well, let's start with a little introduction. I mentioned Crunch Time Sports. Can you talk a little bit about that and share with the listeners everything you guys got going on, everything you do there? Because you talk Lions football, but that's not it. Plus, you've had some recent changes as well.
Yeah, so we are back with Woodward Sports, which, you know, we have a lot of great friends here already. We were around when they kind of first began years ago. And Crunch Time has been something that, you know, me, Booner, have been kind of building the last couple of years, and it's been a lot of fun. We've learned a lot of things. Obviously, we have a passion for Detroit sports, but when we originally left Woodward Sports the first time around, it wasn't because we didn't want to be there because we didn't like Woodward Sports. It was just how the situation was at the time. So fast forward, what we've kind of built with Crunch Time Sports to make it all kind of come full circle, and we get to partner with Woodward Sports and be a part of the foundation that we helped build, and we're excited to keep building. Is exciting with new ownership. They're doing a great job. I'm actually at the new studio, the new office right now in Royal Oak, and now we have our live show 11 to 1 weekday. So we're excited. It's a great partnership, and Detroit sports is so good. Everyone's so passionate here about sports, and 97.1 has been the king here. But to have competition for them is always a positive, and I think that with forces like Crunch Time or Woodward Sports, or the talent that we have here at Woodward Sports, which is a bunch of very, very talented people. I love what we're building, so it's very exciting.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting to see what you guys are doing and where you're going to take it. So
thank you.
Wish you luck on that endeavor, and it's kind of nice to go full circle and go back where you started in some ways. Yeah,
no doubt. And then Lions Collect has been a lot of fun too. Shout out to those guys, Justin, Colton, Will, the people that are behind the scenes that don't get mentioned on camera. It's been a lot of fun. I know we got to interview Brad Holmes, but that has been kind of a long time coming as well. But hopefully in the future, we'll get to kind of work on some bigger interviews as well. And Lions Collectives are great because it's a way for fans to kind of see the guys that cover the Lions, and Colton, Justin, Will, the professionals, I call them. And then me, who I'm an opinionated person. I don't claim to be a part of the media like they are. But it's good, the different perspectives that, they'll joke about me crashing out or having certain opinions, and then those guys bring their professionalism. It's a great mix of talent, but also just conversation. So I've enjoyed it, and those guys I've gotten to get really close with those guys. So it's been a lot of fun there too. They can catch us every single Wednesday. I know it's the off season, so we're a little slow, but as we pick up towards the season, it's every Wednesday at 6:00 where we go live. So that's a ton of fun as well.
Awesome. And yeah, that's where I'm actually even more familiar with your work, is you hosting Lions Collective with Lions beat writers Justin Rogers, Colton Pouncey, and Will Birchfield. And that's something you guys have been doing for about a year. What has that experience been like for you?
It's been incredible. I think being able to, get to know those guys on a personal level. Me and Booner actually went out to the combine the last 2 years, so we've gotten to, get close with some of those guys down there as well. So kind of build those relationships. But yeah, I got reached out to by kind of the parent company that runs the collective, and they reached out to me at the beginning and said, "Hey, we need a host." And typically, it's usually a person in the talking head space that hosts the show, and then they bring in 3 guys that are beat reporters, beat writers that cover the team. It's a great idea, and I said, "Yeah, no question, I'll do it." And I met them that way. First, kind of networked with them that way, and then we've built a pretty close relationship us four. So it's great. And the Brad Holmes interview was kind of later down the line, but all the work we did up until then, just covering the Lions and getting a chance to talk ball with those guys is great, because they provide such a unique perspective that fans and even myself aren't really able to get, because they're up close. They have relationships behind the scenes. They know the players on a personal level. So those guys are the other professionals. So I got a lot of respect for those guys, and yeah, it's a ton of fun. I look forward to it every single week.
Yeah, well, I look forward to it every single week because you guys do put a great show together. And so if you haven't checked out Lions Collective, you got to do that. That you can find it on YouTube, you can find it anywhere they stream. And so definitely check them out. Um, I guess since you do talk to those guys regularly, is there anything interesting you have learned by having that repetition or being with them so often?
I think learning, I know from my perspective, we talk, I mean, I talk sports every single day, but a lot of it's baseline, base level opinions, which I enjoy doing. I enjoy giving my opinion, but those guys kind of provide me a different element and teach me a lot of things about maybe the stuff that goes under the radar, doesn't get talked about enough, but whether it's on a player specific level or, things that happen behind the scenes, how the Lions like covering a team, for example, like things that I might not notice, those guys are on top of because they've been doing it for so long. So they actually help me get better as a host, as someone who does, and covers the Detroit Lions in a different way, but does content. They challenge me in that way. So it's nice. They hold me accountable. They keep me accountable. So they've taught me a lot on the more professional side and, getting a better relationship with the Detroit Lions and kind of them understanding and respecting what we kind of do. So those guys have done a lot for me in my career. I know I get to do a show with them, but on a more personal level, they've taught me so much about the professional side and doing it that way.
That's awesome and great that, when you bring people in that have different expertise and they can add to what you're doing and help make you get better. And you guys got that Brad Holmes interview. That was pretty incredible. So continue to check that out, folks. If you haven't already, do check it out. I want to let the listeners know, Jeff, you and I had this scheduled up, but some legal news broke concerning Detroit Lions cornerback Terrion Arnold. We're not going to get into legal parts here on the show. Dave Burkett of the Detroit Free Press and some others did a really good job of combing through all the details. I don't want to steal their work. If I do recommend, if you want to know the details, check them out to understand the full scope of things. A little bit later, though, in the show, we will touch on the potential impact to the team. I know a lot of Lions fans are wondering about that. Before we move forward, though, Jeff, I know the Lions players are like, hey, we're done with last year. We're looking forward now. But I got to ask you, quick look back. How do you summarize last year's season for the Lions?
I mean, I would say I think fans would agree. Major, major disappointment. I think people sometimes get this mistake in sports, and as a fan, I tend to fall victim to this, just like we all are fans. But we expect everything to be kind of linear, just like 2023. You make the NFC Championship game. Everyone's like, well, next year we should make the Super Bowl, and if we lose, then the next year we should win the Super Bowl. But it's not always like that. And if you've been watching the NFL for a while, injuries occurred. The next year, injuries occurred, ruined basically the entire season. But yeah, last season was extremely disappointing. I know people, can look at a lot of things. I think the John Morton situation, the OC kind of replacing Ben Johnson, didn't work out necessarily, and Dan Campbell had to step in, call plays, and they looked better. But he's working with an offensive line that was terrible, quite frankly. And the offensive line has been the identity of this football team since Dan got here, and they built it up. So I think that was definitely disappointing. The defense suffering some injuries as well, but I just think the defense, that's kind of been the storyline as well under Dan Campbell's tenure. Is you're kind of waiting for a great defense, a Super Bowl level defense. So to not really see them either been able to be healthy or b figure it out throughout the season, whatever the case may be, losing some tough games. The one that sticks to my mind is the Max Brosmer game against the Vikings that they lost, or the Steelers game they allowed 200 yards rushing. Like there's so many.
Yeah.
The Giants game they almost lost, but they ended up pulling it off at the end because of Jahmyr Gibbs. There's so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable for Detroit Lions fans last season because we're just used to winning a bunch of games, and then you get into these waters where you're losing to bad teams or you're barely beating bad teams, and your offensive line stinks, and Jared Goff somehow still looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league despite not having a great O-line. So it was definitely a roller coaster to cover that team last year, and I think it definitely woke up not only the Detroit Lions players, but definitely Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes. I mean, I think when we got a chance to speak to Brad, it was at a perfect time because, they missed the playoffs and you got to see kind of a different vibe out of him and Dan Campbell as well. And Dan comes to the podium, calls OTAs a pajama party. He's over here saying that competition's everything. They're preaching competition. They're adding more bodies into different position groups. So it should excite fans that, they missed the playoffs and it's going to make those guys upset, but fans want more and they deserve more. But it's good to see Brad and Dan take it so seriously and kind of take it personally. Like Brad Holmes the way he structured the offseason, like no rookie mini camp. They changed some things around. He wasn't even at the owners meeting because he was finishing up draft coverage. Like that's how serious those guys took this offseason, missing the playoffs. So extremely disappointing, but knowing how the last couple months have gone, people should be kind of excited to see what that season did to the front office and to Dan Campbell and that coaching staff.
All right. Well, no revisionist history here. How optimistic were you a year ago getting ready for the 2025 season? And does that or has that impacted your optimism this year?
So I understand why if people were optimistic last season, and I see a lot of more pessimistic people, and I understand why. Like for me, the biggest thing for me over the last couple of years has been the defense, quite frankly. I mean, that is my biggest concern. We know what offense you're getting pretty much every year. Even if John Morton's calling plays and he's a disaster, you know, on a typical basis, that offense is rolling into the year and finishing top 5. You know, no matter how it looks, they're still going to score a lot of points. The O-line is back, okay? It seems to be on paper. They've upgraded it. So hopefully that thing translates into the season. But the biggest thing for me is defense, but more specifically a scoring defense that they haven't had really since Aaron Glenn's last year when they made the NFC Championship game. Like it's the tale oldest time. Defense wins championships. And if you go back and look the last 10, 15 years, teams that win the Super Bowl have a top 10 scoring defense. It happens every single year. And offense wins games, but defense wins championships. And I think, you know, it's exciting to watch offense, but I think people have forgotten how important having an elite defense is. And the Seattle Seahawks doing it with Sam Darnold kind of help people remind themselves like, oh, they can win with Sam Darnold because their defense is so dominant. Oh, the Patriots with Drake May, who is incredible, but that defense, top scoring defense as well. Mike Vrabel, defensive head Coach. Mike McDonald, defensive head coach. So, you know, that's the tale of this time. So for me, it hasn't really affected my optimism for this year. I think my skepticism still remain the same as, you know, is Kelvin Shepard your future DC? He's got to prove it this year. And on top of that, can you put together a defense that is adaptable? Because last year we saw them run a lot more base when they probably should run more nickel, just like the league is running now. But can they be that defense for you? And they have all pro players on defense, but it's not always about the all pro players. It's about the other guys as well. I know we're going to talk about Terry Arnold, but some of those other pieces that can step up on this defense. So, of course, I'm skeptic. I've went on record and I said, I don't think the Lions will win the Super Bowl this year. I just don't, because the defense to me is still a concern. I hope I'm wrong, Matthew. I really do. I hope I'm wrong with it. But the minute they show me that they can be a top 10 defense or top 10 scoring defense, I promise you I'm back in. Because the offense, I don't have any really questions about. I don't. I love Drew Petzing, and I have a lot of optimism. But that defense causes me a lot of skepticism.
Understandably so, because it's been the Achilles for a good part of the last 3 to 4 years. Honestly, last year, I think it's incredible the Lions did as much as they did with all the problems they actually had. And it seems like they tried to address a lot of them. They couldn't address them all the way they wanted. They did lose some key pieces. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic again for this season. I'm expecting double-digit wins, though there's some things that have to pan out for that to happen. You talked about that offensive line. On paper, it looks like it's built well, but we have to see what it looks like when it comes together. We've got a new guy at center. And so there's a lot of things they've done, but I look back and I'm like, they didn't play that good last year, yet they were 1 win away from the playoffs, and they were so inconsistent. Yet, like you said, Jared Goff still looked like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, maybe even better than that, even though the offensive line was so inconsistent.
Yeah, the Jared Goff point, I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did last year. I mean, the offensive line, they were almost last in pass block win rate. So they weren't able to protect him. They weren't able to effectively run block. So you're talking about Jared Goff, right? Who's not mobile. That's the biggest knock against him. He can't move.
Right.
He's a statue in the pocket. So he needs an O-line, and he also needs a run game, which most quarterbacks do. So I don't know where that comes from, but that's just what they say. He can't run. He needs a run game. Last year, they weren't able to run the ball, and they weren't able to protect him. He had the most sacks taken in his entire career, and he still put up top 5, top 2 in some category numbers. Like, that's the wild part of this. And also, you had injuries that happened all across on offense, not to the point where they were out for a long time, but you had games Ramon Ra was out. J-Mo was your number 1 wide receiver. Sam Laporta was out. Dave Montgomery wasn't being utilized as he should have, but Jahmyr Gibbs didn't really. There was not moments where he wasn't effective. So I do commend Goff a lot for everything he kind of went through last year, and I think it's funny to look back at his days with the Los Angeles Rams and see how much he's grown as a player.
Yeah.
Like from the stuff he was getting back in LA to who he is now. Like Jared in LA, if he went through all that adversity, would have crumbled. But the fact that we're here with the Detroit Lions, he's played a lot of football in his career, and he's so poised. I got so much respect for him. So I think that needs to be said a lot more for last season. Like people focus on, yeah, they missed the playoffs, but Jared Goff, he had one heck of a year individually. So I know he doesn't care about that, but we should mention that for sure.
Well, yeah, because it seems like a theme in Detroit Lions history that Lions quarterbacks don't recently have not gotten enough credit while being a Detroit Lion. Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, the two best quarterbacks the Lions have had in the last 50 years. Stafford never got flowers while he was with Detroit, at least not from the media outside, and probably half the fan base while he was here. Jared Goff, same thing, not getting the love from the outside as much, getting more and more respect from the Lions as we've seen in the last few years. Lions fans, uh, you know, his first year in Detroit, that was like, I mean, the whole situation was a mess. And
Mm-hmm.
he battled through it. The coaching staff battled through it. I mean, you lost your top two wide receivers, I think, by halftime of week one. And so the amount of growth you've seen out of him, you're right. He has evolved to an even better quarterback than the guy who took the Rams to the Super Bowl. And I also want to bring up that defensive part you've talked about. The reason the Lions defense, if it could improve, would help them so much is, as we've talked about, offenses can win games, but offenses get hot and cold. Defenses don't tend to get hot and cold. And I'm not going with the cold weather thing. I know people like to say that about Jared Goff, but they beat the Packers in Lambeau in the last game of the season to keep the Packers out of the playoffs. They beat the Bears the last week. I think that number is misused. I think he is adequate or above adequate in cold weather. So so there's the Jared Goff thing. I agree with you. He's underrated by many on the Nationals because he can't scramble. He's not that type of a quarterback, but he does
Right.
have some really great skills, including, I don't know if it was Kafka or Petzing. One of them said they didn't realize how accurate Jared Goff was
That was
until they
Kafka.
got there. What's
Kafka.
it? Kafka, yeah. And so there you go. I mean, accuracy is something they say you can't teach. So
Yeah, no, it's a great. And honestly, speaking of Kafka, I do want to mention like I'm very very. I didn't love John Morton when he was hired, just because of the resume and
yeah,
leaving going from Ben Johnson to John Morton. It was clear that that thing was going to spiral at some point. But Drew Petzing, I'm all in, and Mike Kafka obviously helps a lot. But
yeah.
I think the Lions nailed their OC this year. I think Drew Petzing is an absolute stud. I think, but people love him. They talk very highly about him. I had a chance to go to the combine this year and talk to a lot of people around the NFL, and everyone I've spoken to said they love him outside the Lions, just around the NFL. They're like, he's bright, he's smart, he's highly regarded. And I think, at first people were like, well, who is this guy? And I was one of those guys. Who Drew Petzing? Who? But no one's watching Cardinals football. I mean, no one knows who Drew Petzing is. And even Arizona fans, they hated the guy, but you needed context with that as well. So when you go back and watch the Cardinals and see that they had, they were on their fourth string running back, and Kyler Murray stinks, quite frankly, and Jacoby Brissett gets in there, he actually played pretty well, Jacoby Brissett, by his metrics and his standards, but the O-line was disastrous. And there's reports too that Jonathan Gannon didn't even go in the offensive meeting. So it's like Drew Petzing by himself over there. And I'm excited. He's got a ton of tools here, and he uses 13 personnel a lot, which is where the NFL is heading. He's a young, like, people want the boy genius. To me, that's the Drew Petzing. I'm not going to make the comparisons to Ben Johnson, but just on paper, with how he approaches the game in football, and how he's excellent in the run game, and Mike Kafka is going to pair that passing game kind of genius to him. I'm excited for the offense this year. I know we're talking about defense. Defense is important. Don't get me wrong. But the offense, man, I think they'll be back on track this year with the O line and the new play callers. I'm fired up about it.
Yeah, so am I. And like, we say on our show is that there's no salary cap for the coaching staff, and the Lions
Right.
are taking advantage of that by bringing in all these brains. I mean, you've got David Shaw in there to go with Kafka, to go with Petzing, among others. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what they're going to be able to do. I mean, we talked about it, the Giants game, right? If it wasn't for Jahmyr Gibbs' crazy explosion, the Lions lose that game. And Kafka called an incredible game. I'm like, the trick plays they're pulling. I'm like, wait, that's supposed to be us doing that, and the Giants were
Right.
doing that. So a lot of changes though this offseason. Some big names, some guys that Lions fans have gotten to know: Alex Anzalone, Amik Robertson, Decker, Glasgow, among others, no longer here. It's and then they bring in Cade Mays, the biggest name this offseason, a guy who's on the rise, but maybe hasn't quite yet arrived, and maybe this season is his arrival. But there's a lot of expectation on him to solidify that center position, and I'm pretty optimistic he will. But then they brought in some other defensive backs, and but they're names that the Lions aren't fans aren't that familiar with. Also, David Montgomery's gone. I can't forget that because that one's one that hurts me the most. It was the biggest luxury the Lions had having him as a backup, because if something happened to Jahmyr Gibbs, you don't have quite a drop off. I mean, you have still a top 25 running back in the NFL. He's that good. And the reason he didn't look as good last year is because the offensive line just didn't create
Right.
some of the situations. I mean, but back to where I was going initially here. All the changes. How are you feeling between the free agency, the draft, and losing some of those names that Lions fans had gotten to, grow quite fond of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to going back to what I said earlier about Brad and Dan, but Brad specifically here. But they're trying to get younger. It's clear going from AQM to DJ Wanham, and then you had Derek Moore in there, going from Anzalone to now Jimmy Rolder, but they have Malcolm kind of in there as well. Could also maybe foreshadow a scheme change as well, with maybe utilizing more nickel because they brought in some guys that are capable of playing nickel. Roger McCreary. But Roger McCreary is like 26, 27 years old. So they did get younger on paper. I think that was the goal. Cade Mays, another younger player. So the youth was kind of the theme of the offseason for the Detroit Lions. I'll say this: I do like a lot of the guys they did bring in, but at the same time, they are losing some very, like you mentioned, David, which we knew that was going to happen. But I'll go more Anzalone. Anzalone was their number one cover linebacker. I mean,
Yeah.
he was doing dirty work. I mean, he's covering tight ends. I know Jack was he was the green dot. It was Jack's defense. It was getting to that point, but Anzalone is very valuable for a lot of different reasons. And I understand he's getting older, but to replace him, it's not as easy as saying, well, we have Derek Barnes. Like Derek Barnes' skill set is different from Anzalone's. Derek Barnes is more, around the football in the run game. They lined him up at edge, which I don't know if that was necessarily successful, but he's a different type of player than Anzalone. So I'm very curious to see, is it Jack? Because you don't want to take Jack away because Jack's the best run defending linebacker there is. So do you want to make him kind of an Anzalone where he's covering guys, or do you want to keep him at what he does best? So I'm curious to see kind of what happens now post Anzalone with that linebacker core. So that's a big narrative going around. And what does Jimmy Rolder look like year one? Can he give you anything? Is Malcolm going to be the guy to step up? Is Derek Barnes going to take a jump? So I am sad about the Anzalone loss. He's one of my favorite players to cover. He's a heck of a linebacker, but even at his age, just played through injury. He's a Detroit Lion, and that's why Dan Campbell loves him so much. So that one I'll be interested to see. AQM, not necessarily as much upset because I think people get so wrapped up in the numbers, but they
Oh
forget
yeah.
that the Lions' run defense took a massive drop off because AQM can't defend the run. He's great at rushing the passer, but he can't
Yep.
really do much of anything else. And it's not to disrespect him; it's just a fact. So DJ Wanham can defend the run. And, hopefully he can provide some pass rush juice. But Derek Moore going to be a guy that can rush the passer. So that one I'm not as upset about. But the biggest one I think people are talking about is those two nose tackles that left, Roy Lopez and DJ Reader,
Yeah.
because, Ty Leak, as much as we are excited for him, is he a true nose or is he more of a three tech? That's I think Roy Lopez leaving, maybe more so than DJ Reader, even though I got a lot of respect for him as well. I think that's the storyline I'm going to be paying attention to on defense and seeing who kind of takes those snaps. If Kelvin wants to line up a Leam and Tyleek, or someone else that we haven't talked about yet going to be playing that spot. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm pretty. I understand the theme of the offseason, why Brad did what he did, but there are some question marks with some of the guys that did leave and who's going to fill those roles for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the defense, an area that has been of conversation every single offseason, seems to have questions at every single level this year. And yeah, I mean, yes, Levi Onwuzurike is going to probably have to play a significant role for the middle of that defensive line to not take a step back because, Aleem's coming back, but you lost two guys who helped plug up that middle quite a bit. And then we go back to the secondary, and the
Right.
secondary is like, Okay, well, we know Brian Branch. We know what we got there, which is he's probably going to miss the first half of the season. Give or take 4 weeks on either end. And when he comes back, what's he going to look like coming off of that injury? And so you've got that Kirby Joseph. We have no idea what to expect. I kind of think he's ready for week one or he's not ready because I don't really see a middle ground on this one because they're giving him all that rest time. Fortunately for me, I think the Lions have done a great job in bringing depth in for the safeties. You've got Harper back, you've got Maddox, you brought in Chuck Clark. But then the secondary also consists of your defensive backs. We mentioned the free agents they brought in. Well, let's talk about Terrion for a minute. Just let's focus on the potential impact to the secondary and the team. Starting training camp, Terrion could be there, or he could be off the team by then, or he could be there and suspended, right? Those are like the three options you kind of have in the situation. So, how does that impact everything for the secondary with the Terrion situation and where he ends up?
I mean, it's brutal. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's absolutely brutal because we look at this Lions team and we look at their defense, and you nailed it. There's question marks at every level, but specifically corner, they haven't had a number one corner really besides Carlton Davis for a year.
Yeah.
And Carlton ultimately, he left. The Lions offered him a contract. He didn't necessarily like it. Took a different contract, for more money with the Patriots. And they brought in DJ Reed, who I do like DJ Reed, but we all know he's not a number one corner. He's smaller, and he played really well alongside arguably the best corner in football, Sauce Gardner. So DJ Reed isn't necessarily the guy who's going to be your number one corner on a consistent basis. And you expected TA this year to take that jump, and maybe that's on Brad for putting his eggs in that basket with DJ Reed. Like, okay, we know TA is going to take this jump, but they're in a position where you're probably going to have Rocky Sin start some games. Ennis Rakestraw, massive question mark with him. Like what's going on with Ennis Rakestraw? Is he going to be even close to the value of a second round pick at which you drafted him? Now at this point, you really hope something works out for Ennis Rakestraw, but a lot of things are riding on Terran Arnold, man. I had a lot of hope for him this year. I was excited. I think he showed flashes last year for sure before he went down with an injury. The shoulder injury, which he had to get surgery for. But, he cut down on the pass interference calls. He was better in coverage for the most part. There were still moments, but you thought year three he was definitely going to break out and be that number one corner the Lions were looking for. He was really one of the only corners on the roster that's above 6 foot. So that's another part of this whole thing. So it sucks. It's hard to prepare for something like this, but I know Brad has kind of been preparing by signing all these DBs. But the truth of the matter is, and I was talking about this on today's show, the reality of it is number one corners just aren't available. They just aren't. And the ones that are want extensions. Trent McDuffie just got extended by the Rams because he got traded for. So if you're going to trade for a number one corner, you're either trading for Sauce Gardner, which rarely happens. It's got to be organizations like the Jets or the Browns that just say, hey, we're selling, here you go. Or if you do trade for a good corner, he's due for a contract. So it's just hard to go get a number one corner. It's like left tackle. When a team has a good left tackle, I ain't giving them up unless we're completely selling. So it's extremely unfortunate. I don't know what the Lions could really do in this situation. They still have cuts that can happen, but you know how this works. They're cuts. They're not bad players, but they are cuts. These are guys that didn't make other roster. So that's secondary, man, and more so specifically the cornerback room. But you brought up the safeties as well. Some massive question marks there. I'm not going to lie to you. Brian Branch and Kirby. Brian, I can't believe I'm saying this. I actually feel more comfortable with Brian's timetable and return, and he's coming off an Achilles injury, than Kirby Joseph. So
because you know where you things stand with him. Like with Kirby, it's a mystery.
Right. That's the concerning thing. And there is an out in Kirby's contract, which I hate bringing that up because I want Kirby to play a long time in Detroit. He's such a good player. But there's a reason now looking at some of those numbers, and I believe Justin actually brought this up to me before too, Justin Rogers, Detroit Football Network, but he said, like, there's a reason they structured his contract like this. They have it set up a certain way. Because people always say, like, why sign him if you knew there was a knee injury? Guys, they of course they do their due diligence. I don't think they think it was going to get this bad, but they had an idea he was dealing with something with his knee. That's why they put in his contract an out at some point. So I hope it doesn't get to that point. But, man, to look back and see those days where Brian and Kirby were playing together, it makes you think, like, how much more time are we going to get to see that? Because you just, things just and they're gone. You get to see you have the best safety duo in the league, and now we're talking about the questionable future of both of them. So it's unfortunate.
Well, I think that's maybe that feeling of immediacy as well. I mean, I do think by the coaches, by Brad, by Dan,
Right.
the front office as well. I do think as long as you have Jared Goff there, like you have to have somebody under center that's capable. And you could argue there might only be about 10 to 15 teams that feel comfortable with that, and then others who are hoping to catch fire because players catch fire for a season or two as well. So that can happen. But with that, training camp's going to be coming up. You already mentioned kind of the nose tackle area is an area you're looking at, but like, is there a player or position battle that you've got your eye on? Any maybe predictions you got going there?
I'll tell you what. I know there's the obvious ones. Like I'll bring up left guard, which is a massive one, obviously. Like who's going to end up starting at left guard? Christian Mahogany, by the way, might be the only player in that draft class with TA that could end up starting and playing some time there. But we'll see. But left guard's a big one. I think there's a lot of competition in that room. Juice Scruggs is someone that I think is kind of flying under the radar. No one's really talking about a lot, but Miles Frazier, Ben Barch, who's kind of coming back there. So there's a lot of good competition for that left guard spot, which I'm excited for. Linebackers is another big one. I brought it up earlier when we were talking about Anzalone's departure, but that if they're playing base and they have three linebackers at times, like who's the third linebacker? Is it Malcolm Rodriguez? Could it be Jimmy Rolder at some point? What goes on there? But if they don't, the one I'm paying attention to, the one that I'm excited for is nickel. And I want to see who wins the nickel job because Roger McCreary is someone who in college was an incredible player. He was incredible. Didn't necessarily have the pro career that maybe many people projected him to have, but he wasn't that bad with the Rams. And he's actually had some seasons where he's a really good tackler near the line of scrimmage. And he's really good at nickel, especially there's been more highs. There's some lows, but some highs that they really like. And they obviously like some of the skill set he provides. He can make plays around the football. So he's a very formidable nickel to kind of compete there. But I like Keith Abney as well. I think Keith Abney is someone that, for me personally, it's my favorite draft pick of this current class. And I think he's someone that's going to give Roger a run for his money because, he is smaller in stature, but he brings a lot to the table with his cover ability, with he can do a lot of things at nickel that I think the Lions are going to really love. And we saw, speaking of Brian, years ago, a second round pick come in and steal that safety spot and thrived at it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Keith Abney, in training camp especially, kind of gives that nickel position a run for its money. And, we'll see what happens. But that nickel position, I'm paying attention to. And then you also have Christian Izien, who's in that mix as well. He can play nickel, he can play safety. So there's some really good battles across the team. But for me personally, I'm really locked in on that nickel position. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, this is Coach Campbell has said there's more competition across the board than they've had in a long time. And I think it's obvious there are a number of spots where we don't know who the starter is going to be. And that really hasn't been the case the last 2 or 3 years going into training camp. You figured 18 to 20 of them were locked up, and you were looking at just 1 or 2 guys to figure out who was going to be where. But now there's more question marks and whatnot. But you've got competition. I feel good about the guys they brought in. It's going to be interesting to watch in training camp to see how it plays out.
No doubt. He's spot on with it. I want to speak on the competition part you just brought up because I think the last couple of years guys have kind of gotten spots like you said. It seems like there's guys that are just kind of booked into spots every single year, but this year it's one of the most wide open, like across the board, like position group battles that I've seen since probably the early days of Dan Campbell. I know they didn't have a lot of talent at that point, and they have talent now, but they have a deep roster, but a lot of guys that are competing for the same spot. So it'll be very interesting to see. That's what makes covering the line so fun, especially for this training camp, which I can't wait for. But yeah, you're spot on there. Dan Campbell. There's a reason why he's kind of approached this offseason differently. He has a whole different vibe about him, and it's all business with them.
That it is. Well, Jeff, I don't know if you've heard of Cherry Republic, but they are a Michigan-based company. They're based out of Glen Arbor in northern Michigan, but they've got 8 retail locations around the state. They're a sponsor for our podcast, and they've got perfect stuff for game day or summer picnics. And I know you're in the Detroit area. They have an Ann Arbor location that's not too far from you. And so whether you're hosting an event, you just need something better than usual chips and salsa, they've got cherry salsa. They've got some barbecue sauce. Chocolate covered cherries are awesome. I love the cherry nut mix. And so if you haven't checked them out yet, I highly recommend you do. And you can also just go to their website and cherryrepublic.com and place orders there, and they'll ship it right to your house.
Love it.
So, all right. Well, hey, Jeff, before we get you out of here, a few questions for you here. The Lions, success, NFL success. Lions have had 4 straight winning seasons. Yes, 2 of them were 9-8 seasons. And, before the 17 game schedule, that wasn't, as easy to get to. But let me ask you, what's an NFL successful season look like for a team? And what does it look like for the Lions in 2026?
So this is I would love to pull the entire fan base and ask them that question because I think my opinion is I think Super Bowl or bust is where you're at as an organization. That's where I think they're at, and I think people should be there already. I think there's a lot of teams like go ask any. If you look in the NFL, the top tier one NFL teams, if you're a gambler, the top 5 to 10 odds of winning the Super Bowl. If you ask any of their fan bases what's a successful season, they'll say Super Bowl or bust. But then there's some fan bases like, well, if you just make the playoffs, I understand the playoffs are great. All right, it's fun. You get to watch extra games. You get to have your friends over. You get to get your chips and salsa, your cherry chips and salsa, and watch some football. I get it. I understand it. But the goal is ultimately winning the Super Bowl. So, and I don't think the Lions will admit it, but they know it as well because they're past the first playoff win in over 30 years. They made an NFC Championship game first time in franchise history, which is fun. It's a lot of fun. Everyone's excited. But that honeymoon phase is now over. Now it's business. Now it's, hey, we have a good roster. We have all pro players. We have a quarterback like you talked about that gives us a chance to win football games. We have a great head coach. We have a great general manager. Like now we base our success on making and winning a Super Bowl. So, if we're really being fair here, like if you make an NFC Championship game and you give yourself a chance, I can live with that. But if you make the playoffs and win a playoff game and get bounced, how could you argue that's a success compared to where you were in 2023? It feels like you're going backwards, even though you missed the playoffs last season. So for me, in those top 5 NFL teams or top 7, whatever you want to put the Lions like in that equation, top 10, your goal should be to win the Super Bowl. And I think the Lions are in that equation. So whether you think they can or not is a different conversation. But what should they expect? We should be able to win a Super Bowl. That should be the thought process for this team. They missed the playoffs, and it sounds crazy, but we know they're a better team than what they had last year. It's not like they missed the playoffs because they weren't good. They have talent, healthy. They have one of the best rosters in the NFL. So put it together, and let's see what they can make happen. So Super Bowl or bust is my approach, and I think most fans should have that same approach.
Yeah, there are only so many teams in the NFL that have that much talent that can say legitimately, listen, we're Super Bowl or bust. Now, it doesn't mean the other teams don't want it. It
Right.
means the other teams might be in a spot where, hey, we want to make it into the playoffs and then see what happens because anything can happen once the playoffs happen. But if the Lions aren't getting further, whether it's the NFC Championship game again or whether it's to the Super Bowl type thing, then you feel like it's a missed opportunity because this roster is built that well. Yes, there are going to be some things on the roster that were not there last year, and that will be weaknesses. Alex Anzalone will not be there. I still remember that Minnesota game, the last game of the season. He came back, and the defense was inspired, and they handled Sam Darnold and company. But there's enough changes that it's a reminder there's always going to be changes. Like you said, it's not linear. It's not next year is going to be this. Nothing's guaranteed next year. So I think that's that whole business approach we're seeing as well as like, hey, the honeymoon phase is over. It's a great way of putting it as well. The fun was there. I mean, I've been watching this team for decades and this franchise, and you saw the excitement grow. And now it's like, okay, well, the newness is gone. It's still exciting, but now everyone's waiting for that next step. And so, you said you don't think they'll win the Super Bowl this year, but did you have a record prediction and did you predict where they might finish in the NFC North?
So I have them winning the division. I think they're going to win the division this year. I think the Bears, they had speaking of kind of the honeymoon, like they had a great run last year. I still think they'll be a team that's formidable, probably could sneak into the playoffs. But I think the Lions are the only team in the NFC North that are legit, in terms of not only winning double digit games, like the most likely team to do that, but I think in terms of playoff run. I think they're capable of a playoff run. I'm more confident in that than, let's say, the Packers, or the Bears. Even though the Bears I respect a lot because of Ben Johnson, what he's done there, but I would probably go Bears, or excuse me, Lions, Bears, um, and then I think the Packers Vikings are kind of going to be at that bottom spot battling it out. I'm not that high on Kyler Murray. I know people are high on the Vikings. They think the Vikings are back because they got Kyler Murray. I completely disagree with that. I've made that very clear. So I have the Lions winning the division. I have them at 12-5 this season, and yeah, I think it's going to be a fun. The schedule's pretty easy, but more than that, the beginning of the schedule before the bye week kind of sets them up to gain confidence. I'm not saying every game's a gimme, but it should get some confidence. You have that Bills game early. You have the divisional games later in the year. So I think the schedule favors the Lions a lot for them to kind of have a bounce back year. So I'm picking them to win the division. I'm picking them to go 12-5, and I think it's going to be a fun year. Even if they don't win the Super Bowl, it's still going to be a really fun team to cover, in my opinion.
All right. Well, what is the biggest unknown or vulnerability for the team right now? I think you're probably talking defense, but you can be as specific or as general as you want to. But what's the biggest thing that could prevent them getting where you think they're going to go?
I think, to be quite honest with you, it's secondary as a whole. A year ago or 2 years ago, we were talking about the front seven and the defensive line, but it's crazy to where now we're just flipping completely in the front seven. Even though linebacker's a little bit of a question, we feel pretty good. Aiden, you got Derek Moore, you're pairing him with somebody. Aleem's going to be back healthy. Oh yeah, we lost Taron Arnold, and also Brian and Kirby are question marks. So a secondary, and this is something I think actually Will brought up before too. Like if you look at Super Bowl winners or Super Bowl teams, most of these teams have number one corners, or do you just have good secondaries? Like having a good secondary is very important. I know you got to rush the passer and give them a chance, but like last year, Witherspoon, Gonzalez, just alone in that Super Bowl. So to me, and on this defense, the secondary is a massive concern, and specifically corner, but just the secondary as a whole. They have depth, but they might not have the star power they had back with Kirby and Brian. We'll see what happens there. And then obviously with the loss of TA, that potential's gone. So yeah, I would say the secondary would be a reason on defense for sure.
All right. Well, now I want to tap into your Detroit Lions fandom here because you said you've been a passionate fan for a while. Were you a Matthew Stafford fan when he was here? Did you root for him? And how has that gone since he left Detroit?
Okay, so I'll say this: I am still a Matthew Stafford fan. I know people. I'm not a Detroit Ram guy. Okay, I know the Detroit
Good.
Ram.
I am happy to hear that. So that's good.
Okay, I'm just making. I want to make that very clear. I didn't buy the merch. I didn't take care of all that stuff. I do support Matthew Stafford. I always blame the organization, and I won't disregard what Matthew didn't do with those teams he had. So there's moments where Matt definitely didn't show up, in moments where he had the number 2 defense in the league and he didn't show up in the playoffs, or there's like I completely understand that, but my point has always been he didn't get enough chances like the Lions are doing now with Goff. Like they're building a good team around Goff consistently, good organization. Matthew never got that opportunity consistently. So yes, I did watch a lot of Matthew Stafford. He's what I grew up on. My favorite player of all time is Calvin Johnson, Megatron. He's my favorite my favorite player of all time by far. So I actually got a chance to meet him a couple times, and every time I'm just starstruck. So that's where my fandom began, really, watching those guys. And obviously the Lions didn't have a lot of success, which drew me to be a Lions fan and a Pistons fan, and the Red Wings kind of gave me a little bit when I was younger. But it's been brutal. But to be able to now cover them, like where my life, it's perfect timing. As I got into this business, the Lions got Dan Campbell, and I've been blessed. Like people in my position that have been covering the Lions for a long time, like Terry Foster I spoke to last week, and he's had to deal with so much more. And I'm just blessed to be able to, even though we critique Brad, it is nice to have an organization that, we're not talking about as one of the worst run organizations of the entire NFL. So some rough years there, but we can all say at the end of the day, as much as you can critique the Lions or talk about they should do this or do this, it is nice and refreshing to have Dan and Brad here with the Detroit Lions. It's nice.
Oh, it definitely is. And let me hit on a few of those things you mentioned. I, too, was a huge Matthew Stafford fan because I loved what he gave to the team and the effort he put in. Didn't always work out, but
Right.
so I always rooted for him. And yeah, I was never a Detroit Rams fan or whatever. Those I saw someone wearing a T-shirt once, but those just seemed wrong to me. So can't go there. As far as longevity covering the team, I think I appreciate this so much because I was a weekend sports anchor during their 0-16 season
Oh.
and covered it while Matt Millen was there and got let go. And that Lions Rams playoff game, like my wife went with me to that game, and I said to her, this was only a wild card game, but this might be the most incredible sporting event I've ever been to because it was 0 degrees out and Stafford was returning, and it was like the storyline you didn't want to have happen unless the Lions could win. And fortunately they won. And so it took care of that. But you're exactly right. It is a very fun, exciting time to be covering the Lions right now. And especially if you've lived through some of those disappointments, it makes it that much sweeter.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I'm not complaining over here. I mean, we get to critique a GM and head coach that as a duo is probably, top 10 in this league, top 7 in this league. So it's nice. It is really nice. And I'll say this with Matthew, like, he's got a lot of hate when he left, obviously, but which, I understand, fan short for fanatics. I understand, when Dylan Larkin requested trade or Matthew Stafford requested trade, people's first instinct is to feel backstabbed. And I understand why, but for Matthew to go to LA and win a Super Bowl his first year with a stacked team and a good head coach and a good GM, like, should tell you everything you should have already known, which is he was always capable. He just didn't have the opportunities. And even now, like he if you just take his Rams career, he's a Hall of Famer. He has a Super Bowl. He has an MVP. Like, I don't know if you just take his, and then with the Lions, he has all the statistical categories. He's up there and in quarterback. So he's had one heck of a career. MVP, Super Bowl champ, like, well deserved by him.
Yeah, it was really tough when I heard he had requested that trade because as much as you rooted for him, you're like, wait, but he's good, and I don't think people realize how good he is. And then he was recently on the Greenlight podcast with Chris Long, and he kind of talked about his journey and how he's getting better as a quarterback now, and he never would have thought that would have been the case. But talking to Drew Brees, he's like, some of your best years might be these final few years because you've matured as a quarterback, you understand the game better. But it's tough. Fortunately, though, Jared Goff has developed and continued to grow as a quarterback. So we didn't go from Matthew Stafford to no quarterback, and right. A quarterback carousel every 2 years. And Brad and Dan have put together a great team. So the Lions have found success, and it's been good for Detroit fans.
Yeah, and add those first-round picks in there, too. Brad hit on those first-round picks he received in that trade, which makes the thing a whole lot sweeter. I mean, you got some pretty dang good players in there, so it worked out for both sides. I would always take a Super Bowl, but if you had to compare trades, pretty good trade for both sides, I would say. Set the Lions up for the future, and the Rams got a Super Bowl.
Yeah, nobody's complaining about that one.
Yeah.
All right, last question. I don't know, are you a video game person at all? Have you ever played video games?
So I played a lot. So growing up, I played Madden, I played 2K. I've always played sports games.
Okay.
And then I've sprinkled it in there when my parents weren't home, Grand Theft Auto, but mainly sports games. That's all we've been doing. So
all right, same
not
for
as
me.
much anymore. I don't have as much time, but that was all I used to do.
Same for me. Madden was the game. PlayStation or Xbox?
Well, Xbox and then PlayStation later in my teen years. We switched.
Okay.
I joined the enemy side.
I was a PlayStation guy. My little brother was an Xbox guy. I attribute to when they came out. Caleb Williams is on the cover this year. Barry Sanders was on the cover, as so was Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson, I think it was like 2013 or something. Mm-hmm. And then Barry and Adrian Peterson were on there for 14, with Barry being on the PS3, AP being on the PS4. Caleb Williams is on it this year. Any thoughts on that? And was there a Lions player you're hoping to have on there, or are you okay with there not being a Lions player?
Yeah, after last year, you know what? I think no one deserved to be on there. But I will say this about Caleb Williams. I know people are quick to judge a book by its cover, okay? And I understand, when you see a guy with his nails painted, he plays for the Chicago Bears, you're just immediately not going to like the guy. But he is a good quarterback. He is a good quarterback. He's also a very young quarterback. So my take on Caleb Williams, and people in Detroit here will always say, like, oh, they'll call me a closet Bears fan because I think Caleb Williams is going to be really good. I've been saying it since he came out because I watched him back when he was at Oklahoma, transfer to USC. He was really good at USC, clearly, and went number one. But, I mean, do I think it's deserved? I mean, I understand it from a marketing standpoint because – he's Caleb Williams. He's got a big following. The whole Iceman bit thing he's doing where he's on the cover. So I understand it. Usually you're giving it to like a Drake May or even like the MVP of the league currently or someone like that. But it's Madden at the end of the day. I think the game. I'm not going to get a Madden sponsorship anytime soon. So I'll just say the game's depleted over the last handful of years. It's been getting worse, but yeah, it's Lions fans got to hate it. But you got to think though positive. Madden curse is a lot.
Right. Well, that's where I was kind of going with this. And I don't know that the curse has been as trending the last few years as it used to be. But I kind of was like, just don't put a Lions player on there. We don't need
it's almost a blessing,
conspiracy thing part of it all.
Yeah. No, it's a secret blessing, I would argue. I don't want anything happening to any Detroit Lions player. So I'm with you.
All right. Hey, Jeff, anything I haven't asked you want to share before we get out of here? I appreciate all this time.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you having me. No, for people watching, you could check me out more. Obviously 11 to 1 weekdays on Woodward Sports. I'm live with my guy Booner, Caleb Zarnick. We're on there talking shop, talking ball, and then Lions Collective on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Typically, I know we're in June. I think July we're going to do a show or two, and then August we're going to pick back up, and then we'll do weekly, kind of go into this season. So closer to football season, but we're live every single Wednesday. 6 o'clock at night. So you can catch me on Woodward Sports, Lions Collective, and then Crunch Time Sports, obviously across all socials. And then you can follow me at Jeff Iafrate on pretty much every social platform. But thanks for having me, man. Keep up the great work.
Once again, a big thank you to Jeff Iafrate for stopping by and talking Lions and sharing his perspective. Remember, you can check his work out at Crunch Time Sports and the Lions Collective. Thank you, folks, for tuning in, sticking around till the end. Remember, you can find more content and episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. Find us on social media like Twitter, Instagram, as well as YouTube. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.